She laughed at him in front of everyone, called him a waste of space, a man who didn't belong in a bank that handled real money. His 6-year-old daughter heard every word. And then the manager walked over, bowed his head, and asked Mr. Hayes which of his 17 accounts he'd like to access today. The silence that followed was the loudest sound that bank had ever heard. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories about quiet dignity and the moments that change everything, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days in Ashford City, and Logan Hayes still hadn't replaced the hole in the sole of his left boot. He noticed it again that Tuesday morning, standing at the crosswalk on Mercer Avenue, feeling the slow seep of cold water spreading across his sock. He shifted his weight to his right foot. Beside him, his daughter Ava tugged at his coat sleeve with the patience of a child who had learned early that patience was a currency her father valued. "Daddy, the light. I see it, baby. But it's green. It's green for cars." She squinted up at him through the mist, her hood pulled so low it nearly swallowed her eyebrows. "Oh." He squeezed her gloved hand. The glove was 2 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from the kid upstairs in their building, a boy named Marcus who'd outgrown it last winter. Logan had meant to buy her a new pair. He kept meaning to. There was always something else. The water bill, the fee for the school trip to the aquarium, the part-time rent he owed Mrs. Delgado, who pretended she didn't notice when he was a week late. The light changed. They crossed. "Remember what I promised?" Logan asked. "Ice cream." "After school, only if I'm good and I eat all my sandwich. That's the deal." Ava grinned. She had a gap in her front teeth that made every grin look like a secret she was sharing. "I'm going to be so good, Daddy. I'm going to be the goodest." "Goodest isn't a word. It is if I say it." He almost laughed. He felt the corner of his mouth twitch, which was as close as he got most days. They walked another half block before he realized he'd been staring down at the top of her head without saying anything, and she hadn't complained about the silence. She never did. The bank was at the corner of Mercer and 4th, Harbor Union Trust, a tall glass-fronted building with revolving doors that moved too fast for children and old people, with polished marble floors that held the echo of every heel and whisper, and brass fixtures that still smelled faintly of the cleaner someone used on them at 6 that morning. Logan paused at the door. He hadn't been inside a branch in a long time. He did everything through the app on a phone that had a crack running across its screen like a river on a map. But the app had been glitching since Sunday, and the small, quiet fund he kept for Ava things, birthdays, shoes, a broken lamp, and ice cream on a rainy Tuesday, was parked in an old account that wouldn't let him transfer electronically unless he verified something in person. $50. That was all he wanted. $50 to cash in hand, to put in his wallet, to peel 1.5 off later when the two of them stood at the counter at Marlowe's Creamery, and Ava pressed her nose against the glass and tried to decide between strawberry and the one with the little rainbow pieces in it. "Ready?" he asked. "Is it warm in there?" "Warmer than out here." "Good. My fingers hurt." He pushed the revolving door slowly enough for her to keep up, and they stepped inside. The bank was busier than he expected for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. A line of maybe 12 people snaked from the teller counter back toward the center of the floor, forming a loose S-shape between velvet ropes. 3 tellers worked behind the counter. A 4th window was closed. The air smelled like cold coffee and perfume, and the faint metallic tang of wet umbrellas drying against a brass stand by the door. Logan guided Ava to the end of the line. He rested his hand on her shoulder. The woman directly in front of him was tall, maybe 5'9" in her heels, with dark hair pulled into a low, severe knot at the back of her head. She wore a camel coat that looked more expensive than Logan's entire wardrobe, a leather handbag tucked under one arm, and the kind of expression that said she had 3 more important places to be and this was not one of them. Her phone was in her hand. She was scrolling. She turned slightly, caught a glimpse of Logan and Ava in her peripheral vision, and the scrolling paused for exactly 1 beat before it resumed. Logan pretended not to notice. He noticed. He'd been noticing that kind of thing for 8 years, ever since he'd started wearing work boots to every room he entered, ever since the jacket he wore now, olive canvas, frayed at both cuffs, a small tear at the left pocket he'd stitched up himself one night while Ava slept, had become his default uniform. People glanced. then glanced away, then talked a little quieter or a little louder, depending on the kind of person they were. Daddy. How long is it going to be? Not long. Maybe 10 minutes. That's a lot of minutes. It's not that many. Ava leaned her shoulder against his thigh. I think it's a lot. The woman in the camel coat shifted her weight. Her phone dropped to her side. She turned just enough for Logan to see the sharp cut of her profile, the small crease between her eyebrows. Is there a problem? She said. Not loudly, not quietly either. Logan blinked. Sorry? Your daughter. Is she okay? She keeps... The woman waved a hand, a gesture that could have meant anything. Leaning. She's 6. Right. She's tired. Right, the woman said again and turned back around. Logan felt his jaw tighten. He didn't say anything. He'd learned a long time ago that the cheapest thing a man could buy was his own silence. He smoothed his hand down the back of Ava's hood, and she looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes, and he winked at her, and she giggled, a small, startled giggle that she muffled into her mittens. The line moved forward. 1 person. 2. Her name was Claire Whitmore. She wouldn't learn his name for another 11 minutes. At 28, she'd already been on the cover of a regional business magazine, been named in 2 separate 30 under 30 lists, and hired a staff of 14 at the small logistics startup she'd built from a spare bedroom into a $7 million operation in 4 years. She was on her way to a pitch meeting at 11:15. She needed to deposit a check her father had mailed her for her birthday. A ceremonial thing, $500, a tradition he'd kept up since her 18th. She could have done it on her phone. She'd tried. The app had rejected the endorsement twice, and she was not the kind of person who let a small inconvenience become a larger one, which was why she was here. Standing in line, behind a man in a soaked canvas jacket with a hole in his boot and a child tugging on his sleeve. She didn't think of herself as a cruel person. She would have told you, if you'd asked, that she was simply efficient, that she valued time, because time was the one resource nobody could manufacture more of, that she had opinions about the inefficiency of cash transactions in the 21st century, and opinions about parents who brought small children into adult spaces, and opinions about what it said about a man when he didn't bother to replace a torn jacket before a professional errand. She would have said all of that, and she would have meant it, and she would not have understood in that moment that every single one of those opinions was about to be handed back to her in a form she couldn't refuse to receive. The line moved again. She was now 4th from the counter. Excuse me, she turned. Do you know what you're here for? Logan looked up. Sorry? I'm asking if you know what you need. Sometimes they have a greeter. They can direct you. I know what I'm here for. Okay. She nodded, slowly, the way people nodded when they were being patient with someone they believed did not deserve patience. It's just, this line is for the main teller counter. If you're cashing a check or something small, there's an ATM right outside that, I'm not cashing a check. Right. Thanks for the suggestion. Claire paused. She tilted her head. Something in his voice, quiet, flat, very nearly polite, didn't quite match the man she'd been looking at. But she filed that away, the way she filed away small anomalies in quarterly reports, and gave him a thin smile. Of course. She turned back to the counter. Behind her, Ava tugged on Logan's coat again. Daddy. Yeah, baby. Why did the lady ask you that? She was being helpful. She didn't sound helpful. Sometimes people try to help in a way that doesn't feel like help. It's still help, though. Mostly. Ava frowned. She was a thoughtful child, and she did not even at 6 accept easy answers. I don't think she was being helpful, Daddy. Okay. I think she was being... Ava searched for the word, her small face scrunching. Mean. Claire Whitmore, 4 feet away, heard every word. Her shoulders tensed, very slightly. She did not turn around. Logan knelt down, slow and careful, so his face was level with his daughter's. He put one hand on her cheek. His palm was rough and warm, and she leaned into it the way a cat leans into a familiar windowsill. Listen to me, honey. You don't know what's in somebody else's day, okay? Maybe she's having a rough morning. Maybe she's got somewhere to be. Maybe somebody was mean to her when she was little, and nobody told her she didn't have to be mean back. But she was mean to you. She was impatient. That's different. It felt like mean. I know. He brushed her hood back, smoothed a curl of hair off her forehead. But we don't judge a whole person by 1 minute, Ava. We just don't. Not ever. Promise me. Promise. He stood up. He put his hand back on her shoulder. Claire's neck, under the dark knot of her hair, had gone faintly pink. The line moved. A man 2 places ahead of them finished his business and walked away whistling. The woman directly in front of Claire stepped up to the counter. Claire checked her phone. 10:34. She had exactly 41 minutes before she needed to be on the 16th floor of a glass building 6 blocks away, pitching a Series B round to a partner at a venture firm who had, she knew, already decided about her in the first 30 seconds of the meeting. The way everyone decided about everyone in the first 30 seconds. Logan behind her was humming under his breath, something low and tuneless. A lullaby, maybe. She couldn't tell. Ava, now bored, had begun counting the tiles on the marble floor. 16, 17, 18. Daddy, there's a big one here that's different. It's the same size, baby. It's darker. Probably someone spilled something a long time ago. Oh. She considered this. Like coffee? Maybe. Like blood? Logan laughed. A real one this time. Short, surprise, he said, tired. Where do you get these ideas? Marcus. Of course, Marcus. Marcus says people fight in banks sometimes and they bleed. Marcus has an active imagination. What's active imagination? It means Marcus watches too much TV. Claire, in front of them, pressed her lips together. She was not smiling. She was absolutely not smiling. She was smiling. She caught herself and the smile went away like someone had pulled a plug. But... Ma'am, I can help you over here. Claire snapped to attention and walked, brisk and efficient, to the teller at the second window. A thin woman with rimless glasses and a name tag that read, Priya. Claire slid the check and her ID across the counter. Priya scanned them with practiced blank courtesy. Just depositing this to your checking, Ms. Whitmore? Yes, please. And I need to verify a wire that was supposed to post yesterday. Of course. Claire glanced behind her, just once, and saw that the man in the canvas jacket had moved up a place. His daughter was now perched on the edge of a decorative planter, swinging her legs. He was watching her with an expression Claire could not quite read. Not pride. Not exactly. Something underneath it. Something that looked, for a flickering second, like exhaustion wearing the mask of devotion. She turned back to Priya. And how long does... Just a moment. Priya's fingers paused on her keyboard. She glanced up over Claire's shoulder, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. Then she looked down again. Sorry, just a moment, please. Claire waited. Priya typed. The wire verification printed. Claire signed it, received her receipt, and tucked everything into her handbag in a single smooth motion. Thank you for your patience, Miss Whitmore. Have a good afternoon. You too. Claire turned to leave. She did not leave. She should have left. Every rational fiber of her being, the part of her that had built a $7 million company on the ruthless triage of her own minutes, was screaming at her to walk to the revolving door, step through it, and forget she had ever stood behind a man in a torn coat. But some other part of her, some smaller and quieter part she did not often consult, made her pause beside the velvet rope. She told herself she was checking her email. She pulled out her phone and did not check her email. Logan stepped up to the counter. He nodded at the teller, a young woman in her mid-20s whose name tag said Elena, and she smiled at him with the open friendliness of someone who had not yet learned to sort people by their jackets. Hi there. What can I do for you today? I need to withdraw $50, please. Sure. Do you have your card? I do. He reached into the inside pocket of his canvas coat and pulled out a leather wallet. The leather was dark and soft with age, worn smooth at the edges. The kind of wallet a man might have owned for a decade. He withdrew a debit card. Black, matte, no logo on the front. Only a small silver monogram in the lower right corner. He handed it across the counter. Elena took it. She ran it through her reader. Her face did something strange. It happened in stages. First, a small tightening around the eyes. Then a slow blink. as though she were rereading something and could not quite believe what she saw. Then her mouth opened, very slightly, and closed again. She glanced up at Logan and then back at her screen, and her hand hovered over the keyboard without actually touching it. "Sir, 1 second, please. Take your time. I just need to—" "It's okay." Elena pressed a small button under the counter, the kind of button that did not make a sound anyone outside of the counter could hear. Somewhere at the back of the bank, behind a frosted glass door marked Private Client Services, a man named Harold Okafor looked up from his laptop. Ava was still swinging her legs on the planter. "Daddy." "Yeah." "Did the card not work?" "It worked, honey." "Then why is she—" "She's just double-checking something." "Is it because your coat is old?" He laughed quietly, a puff of breath. "No, it's not because of my coat. Because some people think old coats mean poor." "I know they do." Marcus said. "Marcus says a lot of things." "Marcus said if you look poor, people think you're a bad person." "Marcus is wrong about that." Ava kicked her heels against the side of the planter. The sole of her sneaker left a small black scuff on the marble. "I'm going to tell him." "You do that." Claire Whitmore, 6 feet away, was still pretending to check her phone. Her thumb was moving across the screen in meaningless patterns. She had, without meaning to, scrolled past the same email 4 times. Nah. The frosted door opened. Harold Okafor was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 60s, impeccably dressed in a dark navy suit with a silver tie clip and cufflinks that caught the overhead light as he moved. He had been the senior manager of the Harbor Union Trust Mercer Avenue branch for 11 years. Before that, he had spent 23 years at a larger institution downtown. And before that, he had emigrated from Lagos with his mother at the age of 19, with $43 and a scholarship letter in his pocket. He had risen through the ranks of American banking the way men rose through the ranks of American banking when they were not permitted to make a single mistake, which is to say, slowly, brilliantly, and with an absolute refusal to waste a single moment on a person who did not deserve his attention. He walked across the lobby with purpose. He did not hurry. He did not amble. He moved the way a man moved when he understood exactly whom he was moving toward, and he did not stop until he was standing 3 feet from Logan Hayes. Then he smiled. Not a customer service smile, not a manager smile. A real smile. The kind of smile a man gave an old, respected acquaintance he had not seen in a while. "Mr. Hayes, I apologize for the wait." The lobby noise, which had been the normal low hum of a bank at mid-morning, did not go quiet. Not exactly. It shifted. A few heads turned. A woman at the far end of the counter, mid-transaction, paused. A security guard by the front door, who had been idly watching the rain, looked over his shoulder. Claire Whitmore's thumb stopped moving on her phone. Logan nodded. "Harold, good to see you. Sorry for the—" He gestured vaguely at the line, the counter, the general situation. "The app was giving me trouble. We updated the system on Sunday. It's caused a few hiccups. We're addressing it. No rush. May I ask what you needed today?" $50. Harold paused, just for a beat. His professional expression did not flicker, but something in his eyes, a kind of gentle, knowing warmth, settled in a way that someone watching carefully might have noticed. "Of course. Which of your accounts would you like me to draw from today, Mr. Hayes? The primary operating or the—" "Primary's fine." "Certainly." Elena, the young teller, was staring at her screen with the stillness of a person who had just realized she was holding her breath and was now trying to remember how to let it out. Harold turned to her mildly. "Elena, would you mind processing a withdrawal from Mr. Hayes's primary account? $50. I'll countersign." "Yes. Yes, of course, sir." Elena's hands moved. She was careful not to look at Logan's face. She was, Logan could tell, mortified. Not at him. At herself for whatever small internal calculation she had made when he'd first handed her the card. He felt a little sorry for her. "Elena," she looked up. "You did the right thing calling Harold over. Don't worry about it, seriously." She nodded. She almost smiled. She did not quite manage it. Bas. Claire Whitmore was still standing by the velvet rope. She had, at some point, lowered her phone. She had not realized she had lowered it. She was simply standing there, very still, with her expensive coat and her expensive bag and her expensive shoes, and her brain was attempting to reconcile two images that refused to sit in the same frame. A man in a soaked canvas jacket with a hole in his boot. A man whom the senior manager of one of the oldest private banks in Ashford City had just addressed by name, with a deference usually reserved for people whose names appeared on the outside of buildings. "Which of your accounts would you like me to draw from today, Mr. Hayes?" The words played back in her head. Which of your accounts? Plural. She thought, with the clarity of a woman who had spent 4 years studying balance sheets, about what it meant for a branch manager of Harold Okafor's caliber to come out of a frosted glass office for a $50 withdrawal. It meant precisely one thing. It meant that the man standing at the counter with the little girl on a planner was not a customer. He was a client. There was a difference in banking, and Claire, of all people, knew what it was. Her stomach did something slow and strange. She thought about what she had said in the line. This line is for the main teller counter. If you're cashing a check or something small, there's an ATM right outside. She thought about her tone. She thought with a flinch about her face. She thought about the little girl. I think she was being mean. "Here you are, Mr. Hayes." Elena slid a small envelope across the counter. Inside were 2 20s and a 10. Logan took them, folded them once, and slipped them into his wallet. He tucked the wallet back into his coat. "Thank you, Elena. You have a good day." "You too, sir." "Harold, always a pleasure." "Likewise. Give my best to Ava." Logan smiled. "She's right there. You can give it to her yourself." Harold turned. His face softened. He crossed the few feet to the planter and crouched down, with the careful slowness of a tall man who did not often crouch. "Hello, Miss Ava." Ava looked up at him. "Hi. Do you remember me? You gave me a lollipop one time." "That's right, I did. It was grape." "It was. Do you have any more?" Harold laughed, a low rumble. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a single wrapped lollipop, grape again, which he held out with the solemnity of a man presenting a gift of state. "For being patient." "Thank you." "You're very welcome." He stood up. He nodded at Logan. "Take care, my friend." "You too." Logan took Ava's hand. They walked, unhurried, across the marble floor toward the revolving door. The lobby was not silent exactly, but it had a quality now that it had not had 5 minutes ago. A watchfulness. The woman who had paused mid-transaction was looking openly. Elena at the counter was pretending to type. The security guard had gone back to the rain, but his shoulders were a little straighter, and Claire Whitmore, frozen by the velvet rope, watched them come. Logan saw her. He did not make a scene of it. He did not even slow down. He simply met her eyes, for perhaps a second and a half, as he walked past her. His expression held nothing. No triumph, no anger, no amusement. Just a level, quiet, almost gentle acknowledgement, the way a man might look at a stranger he had passed on a bus. Then he was past. Ava, at his side, was unwrapping her lollipop with both small hands. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. Can I have my ice cream and my lollipop? Only one before dinner." "But it's already partly lunch." "Ava." "Fine, ice cream." "Good choice." He pushed the revolving door, and they stepped out into the rain. But Claire did not move. She stood by the velvet rope for a full minute, maybe longer. Her phone was still in her hand. Her pitch was in 43 minutes, 6 blocks away, and she could not remember the first line of it. She could not remember what her own company made. She could not remember anything at all except the sound of a 6-year-old girl saying, "I think she was being mean," and a man kneeling down to tell his daughter that they never judged a whole person by 1 minute. She walked, slowly, to the revolving door. She stepped through. The rain hit her face. She tilted her chin up into it, just for a second, and let it happen. Her knot of hair went damp at the edges. A drop ran down the bridge of her nose and caught at her lip. Across the street, 50 yards away, she saw them. Logan and the little girl walking slowly, hand in hand, toward a crosswalk. The rain was coming down harder now. Logan had pulled Ava's hood up further. She was holding the grape lollipop straight out in front of her, like a sword. He was saying something to her, something Claire couldn't hear, and the little girl was nodding. Then Logan did something small. He stepped slightly to the side so that he was between Ava and the road. He put his body between his daughter and the passing cars, the way a man might put his body between a child and anything, without thinking about it, the way some people did without thinking, and other people had to be taught. Claire watched them until the light changed. She watched them cross. She watched them disappear around the corner of 4th Street toward a small creamery with a pink and white awning that Claire had walked past 100 times in her life and had never once gone inside. She stood in the rain for a long time. Then she turned very slowly and walked in the opposite direction, toward the 16th floor of a glass building where a partner at a venture firm was about to be told, by a young woman with a damp coat and a strange look in her eye, that she was 10 minutes late because she had just watched something happen that she needed before anything else. A moment to think about. At Marlowe's Creamery, Ava stood on her tiptoes at the glass case and frowned at her options with the seriousness of a judge. "Strawberry," she said. "No rainbow, no strawberry. Take your time. It's really hard, Daddy. Biggest decision of your life. Don't tease." He laughed. He tucked a damp curl behind her ear. The woman behind the counter, a round-faced woman with a name tag that said Betty, smiled at them with the easy warmth of a woman who had been scooping ice cream for 30 years and had learned to read children in a single glance. "Take your time, sweetheart." "I can't decide." "How about one scoop of each?" Ava gasped. She turned to Logan with her eyes enormous. "Daddy, 2 scoops." Logan pretended to consider. He pulled his wallet from his coat and thumbed through it thoughtfully, as though checking a balance. "Well, I do happen to have—" He pulled out a single $10 bill. "Exactly enough for 2 scoops and a coffee for me." "A miracle. A miracle." Betty rang them up. Logan paid with the 10. He got back $3 in change, which he slipped into the tip jar without any ceremony at all. They sat at a small table by the window. Ava's legs did not reach the floor. She kicked them happily against the chair leg as she worked on her cone. Strawberry on top, rainbow on the bottom, a slow pink and technicolor drip already beginning to run down the side. Logan held his paper coffee cup in both hands and watched her. His boot was still wet. His jacket was still torn. His phone in his pocket was still cracked. He felt, for the first time that week, that he had remembered how to breathe. Outside the window, the rain came down. Somewhere 6 blocks away and 16 floors up, a young woman in a damp camel coat was standing in front of a whiteboard, in front of a man she was supposed to convince to give her $10 million, and was saying, slowly, carefully, unexpectedly, that before she began her pitch, she needed to tell him a short story about what had just happened to her in a bank on Mercer Avenue. She did not know yet why she was telling him. She would not know for a long time, but she had begun, without understanding she had begun, to change. And back at the small table by the window at Marlowe's Creamery, Ava Hayes looked up at her father with a ring of pink ice cream around her mouth and said, very solemnly, "Daddy, this is the best day of my whole entire life." And Logan Hayes, who had not yet dried out his boot, and who did not yet know that a stranger in a camel coat had stood in the rain and watched him cross the street, and who had not yet understood that the smallest moments of a man's life were sometimes the ones that rearranged, quietly, the lives of people he had never met. Logan Hayes smiled at his daughter and reached across the table with a napkin and very gently wiped the ice cream from the corner of her mouth. "Mine too, baby," he said. "Mine too." The 16th floor of the Callahan building smelled like cold espresso and carpet cleaner. Claire Whitmore had been in that conference room 4 times before. She knew the exact spot on the wood grain table where someone had left a ring from a coffee cup and no amount of polishing had ever gotten it out. She knew the view. Gray today, with the rain running in slow sheets down the floor-to-ceiling glass. She knew the way the light hit the back of Marshall Cade's bald head when he sat at the far end with his arms folded. She did not know, until she sat down, that she had left her pitch deck in the car. "Claire?" Marshall nodded. He had a voice like a drawer closing. "You're 11 minutes late." "I know. I'm sorry." "You've never been late." "I know." He watched her. He had gray eyes, the kind of gray that went almost colorless in certain light, and he was looking at her the way he looked at a line item he didn't like. "You all right?" "Yes, I just—" She pulled out her laptop. She set it on the table. She did not open it. "Marshall, before I start, can I ask you something? If it's fast." It's fast. She paused. She looked at the coffee ring on the table. Do you ever have a moment where you realize you've been someone you didn't mean to be? Marshall's eyebrows moved, just slightly. He had been a venture partner for 19 years. He had heard a lot of openings in that room. He had never heard that one. That's a strange question for $10 million. I know. Are you pitching or are you not pitching, Claire? I'm pitching. She took a breath. She opened the laptop. I'm pitching. I watched something this morning and I can't shake it, and I thought if I didn't say it out loud, I'd sit here for an hour and not really be here. Marshall leaned back in his chair. He tapped one finger on the table, slow, twice. Tell me in 30 seconds. I was at a bank. There was a man in line in front of me. He had a little girl. I said something. I didn't say anything terrible. I said, her mouth went dry. She took a sip of water from the glass that had been set out for her, and it tasted like nothing. I said something that a better person wouldn't have said, and then the manager came out, and the man I'd been condescending to turned out to be someone the manager addressed like he was somebody, and his little girl had already told him I was being mean. Ji bo asamot. Marshall did not move. The thing is, Claire said, it wouldn't have mattered if he was nobody. It would have been the same thing I did. I just wouldn't have found out. There was a long silence. The rain made a soft sound on the window. Marshall uncrossed his arms. He leaned forward. He folded his hands on the table in front of him, the way a man folded his hands when he was deciding whether to say what he was about to say. Claire. Yes. You came in here to pitch me a Series B. I did. And instead you opened with a confession. I know how it sounds. I'm not sure you do. He paused. I like it. I don't trust it yet. But I like it. He gestured at her laptop. Start the deck. We'll come back to the bank. She started the deck. She pitched for 41 minutes. She was by any measure not at her best. Her voice caught twice. She forgot the revenue projection on slide 9 and had to pull it up from a spreadsheet. She stumbled over the name of a competitor she had memorized like a prayer. And yet something about her, that morning, was different in a way that made Marshall Cade lean forward instead of back, that made him ask 3 questions he had never asked her before, that made him, at the end of the meeting, look at her across the scuffed wood grain table and say slowly, I'm going to think about this. I'll call you Friday. She had expected a no. She had walked in expecting a no. She walked out not knowing what she had walked into. The rain had slowed by the time she got back to her office on 19th Street, but the sky was still the color of an old nickel. She sat at her desk with her coat still on. Her assistant, a young man named Theo with a septum ring and a habit of color-coding her calendar in shades of green, stuck his head in. How'd it go? I don't know. That's new. I know. You want coffee? I want the file on anyone who's ever invested in this company. Theo paused, one hand on the doorframe. Define ever. Ever. Day 1. Series Seed. The Angels. The Bridge Round. The convertible notes. All of it. That's a lot of paper. I know. He looked at her for a moment, the way a good assistant looks at a boss who is behaving in a way that does not match the pattern, and then he nodded and went away. Claire did not know yet why she had asked for the files. She told herself it was because she needed to refresh her memory for Marshall's Friday call. She told herself she wanted to check the exact cap table language on the early convertible notes in case there was a pro rata question. She told herself a great many things, efficient things, things a CEO would tell herself on a wet Tuesday afternoon. She did not tell herself the truth, which was that in the back of her mind a door had cracked open, and through it a very small voice had begun to ask a question she did not yet want to hear. What if you've met him before? She shut her laptop. She opened it again. She shut it. Theo, she called. He appeared, holding a mug. Coffee, black. I took the liberty. Thank you. One more thing. Shoot. The anonymous fund, the one that came in at the seed round through, what was it, the law firm? Bellamy and March. Bellamy and March. They sent us a check for $80,000 when we had $41 in the operating account and a landlord threatening to change the locks. I remember. We never found out who it was. No, that was part of the deal. The LP was anonymous. Bellamy and March was just the vehicle. Can we find out now? Theo set the mug down carefully on her desk. He looked at her the way a person looks at someone holding a match near a pile of dry leaves. Claire, that investor signed a non-disclosure on the other side of the wall for a reason. I know. And we've signed an operating agreement that says we don't ask. I know. So what are you actually asking? She was quiet for a long moment. She picked up the mug. The coffee was hot and bitter, and she did not drink it. I'm asking, she said, whether there's any way to know without formally asking. Theo exhaled. He rubbed the back of his neck. There's always a way. Whether we should is a different question. Just see what you can find. Don't do anything that gets us in trouble. I'm not asking you to break anything. I'm just... She stopped. She looked out the window at the rain. I'm just asking. He studied her for a beat. Is this about the meeting this morning? No. Claire. It's not about the meeting. Okay, he said, in the tone of a man who did not believe her but had decided to let her lie. I'll see what I can see. He closed the door behind him. Across the city, in a 2-bedroom walk-up apartment on the 3rd floor of a narrow building on Ellery Street, Logan Hayes was sitting on the kitchen floor with a screwdriver between his teeth and the back panel of a dishwasher on his lap. Daddy? What are you doing? Fixing. Fixing what? He took the screwdriver out of his mouth and set it on the linoleum. Mrs. Delgado's dishwasher leaked all over her kitchen last night. She called me at 6 this morning. Ava considered this from the doorway. She was still wearing her school clothes, a small blue sweater with a star on the front, navy leggings, mismatched socks, because she had refused to change, and Logan had not had the energy to make it a battle. Why did she call you? Because I live upstairs and I know how dishwashers work. Why do you know how dishwashers work? Because I used to build them. You built dishwashers? I built parts for them, a long time ago. Before I was born? Way before. Huh. She came over and sat down on the floor next to him, legs crossed, chin in her hands. She was eating the last of the lollipop from the morning. Her tongue was bright purple. Was it fun? Sometimes. Were you good at it? I was okay at it. Marcus says his dad is good at everything. Marcus's dad sounds exhausting, Ava giggled. Logan picked up the screwdriver again. The dishwasher panel was old, older than the apartment building, older probably than him. Mrs. Delgado had bought it used from her cousin in 2009, and it had been limping along ever since. He turned it over in his hands. He could see the cracked gasket. He could see also that the real problem was the water inlet valve, which had probably been failing for months and had finally given up in the middle of a wash cycle. He would need a new valve. The part would cost him maybe $34 at the hardware store on 8th. He would not tell Mrs. Delgado that. He would tell her $80. And he would take the difference in the jar of pennies she kept on her windowsill, the way they had been doing it for 6 years. Daddy. Yeah, baby. That lady this morning. He did not look up. Yeah. Do you think she feels bad? I don't know. I think she does. Why? Ava shrugged. Her tongue ran along the edge of the lollipop stick. Her face got pink when I said she was mean. Logan stopped. He set the screwdriver down. He looked at his daughter. You noticed that? Yeah. You didn't say anything. I was being polite. She said it with the gravity of a 6-year-old who had recently learned the word. You told me to be polite at the bank. He smiled. It was a slow, tired, real smile. He reached over and cupped the back of her head with his hand, and she leaned into it, and for a moment the two of them just sat there on the linoleum floor with a busted dishwasher panel between them. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? For noticing. Is noticing important? Noticing's almost everything. She thought about this. Then she said, Are you good at noticing? He did not answer right away. He picked up the screwdriver. He turned the panel over. Sometimes, he said, sometimes I'm very bad at it. He had been very bad at it 8 years ago, which was part of why he lived the way he did now. He did not think about it often. He had trained himself over years not to. But the morning had stirred something, and the thing about a stirred memory was that once it moved, it kept moving until it settled again somewhere else. So while Ava wandered off to the living room to negotiate with a plastic horse and a stuffed rabbit about the terms of their upcoming wedding, Logan sat on the kitchen floor with his hands on a dishwasher panel, and he let himself think, for the first time in a while, about Eleanor. Eleanor had been his wife. She had been a tall, sharp-boned woman with hair the color of wet straw, and a laugh that Logan had heard exactly 11 times in their 4-year marriage, which had been, he could see now, the whole problem. He had met her at an industry dinner in Chicago when he was 24, and the youngest vice president Hayes Vernon Industrial had ever had. She had been a corporate attorney. She had worn a red dress that night, and she had been, by everyone's measure, the best-looking woman in the room. And Logan, who had grown up poor in a mill town in central Pennsylvania and had not yet learned the difference between being chosen and being selected, had mistaken her interest for love. They had married 14 months later. Ava had come 2 years after that, and the marriage had survived her arrival by approximately 16 months. It had not been a dramatic end. There had been no affair, no screaming, no thrown plates. Eleanor had simply, one Sunday afternoon in September, sat across from him at the kitchen table of the house he had bought her in Lincoln Park, and told him in a voice that was not unkind that she did not think she was built for this, that she had tried, that Ava was perfect, and she was sorry. But some people, she had come to understand, were not the kind of people who stayed. She had signed away custody. She had signed away the house. She had asked for a check, which he had written, and she had cashed. She had moved to a city on the other coast, and she had not called. Ava had been 22 months old. Logan had, that week, done 2 things. First, he had gone into his office at Hayes Vernon and told his uncle, the CEO, that he was taking an indefinite leave of absence. Second, he had driven to a small apartment in a neighborhood he had never lived in a city he had only ever passed through on business, and he had signed a lease on a 2-bedroom walk-up with water stains on the ceiling and a stove that only lit 3 burners. He had done this for a reason that, at the time, he could not fully articulate. He had tried once to explain it to his uncle, and he had failed. The closest he had ever come was something like, "I was raised by people who had nothing. My daughter is going to be raised by me. And I cannot be raised by me if I'm living in that house." He had kept the money. Of course he had kept the money. A man with a 2-year-old did not walk away from money. But he had put it, almost all of it, in a trust in Ava's name. And he had lived, and was still living, on what he could make fixing the things his neighbors could not afford to replace. He did not advertise it. He did not discuss it. His old company ran without him under the hand of his cousin, and the board sent him quarterly reports that he barely read. He voted his shares by proxy. He appeared once a year at the annual meeting in a suit he kept in a garment bag in the back of the closet for exactly that purpose. The rest of the time, he was just a man in a torn jacket with a hole in his left boot who lived on Ellery Street and who had, until that morning, thought of all of this as a private arrangement between himself and the life he had decided to live. He had not thought, until a little girl on a planter said, "I think she was being mean," that a stranger could crack the surface of it. He picked up the screwdriver. He went back to work. By 4 o'clock, Claire had not eaten lunch, had canceled a 3:30 call, and was staring at a printout on her desk of the capitalization table from the company's seed round. The anonymous LP had come in under a vehicle called Juniper Hill Partners. Claire had known that name for 4 years. Everyone in her industry who had raised a seed round from Bellamy and March knew it. Juniper Hill was a quiet, blue-blooded little family office that sometimes made small, early bets on companies the bigger funds had passed on. It had no website. It had no public partners. It was, as far as anyone had ever been able to determine, a legal entity and a mailing address and a wire routing number, and nothing else. Theo knocked once and came in without waiting. So. I asked around, carefully. I want to note for the record that I did not cross any lines. Noted. Juniper Hill is controlled by a trust. The trust is administered by Bellamy and March, which we already knew. The trust has one beneficial owner, which we did not know. Claire's heart did a small, unpleasant thing. Who? I don't have a name. I have a monogram. A monogram. Whoever controls it signs things with a single letter. Apparently it's a whole deal. L.H. That's the whole signature. Our wire came with a memo line that just said L.H.-Whitmore. Claire sat very still. L.H. Could be anybody. Lloyd Harrison, Linda Hodge, Larry Hoffman. There's like 40 of those names in this city. Or Logan Hayes. I mean, Theo stopped. Wait, Logan Hayes. Why would you? The man in the bank. This morning. The one the manager came out for. His name was Hayes. Theo looked at her. He had gone very slightly pale. Claire, there are a lot of people named Hayes. I know. A lot. I know. You can't just... Theo, I need you to find out if Logan Hayes has any connection to Juniper Hill Partners. Claire, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to call him. I'm not going to show up at his door. I just need to know if I'm crazy or if I'm not. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. This is a very strange day, he said. Yes. Okay, he said. Give me an hour. He came back in 47 minutes. He did not sit down. He stood in the doorway with a single sheet of paper in his hand, and he looked at Claire with the expression of a man who had been handed a piece of news he did not know how to deliver. Close the door, Claire said. He closed it. Tell me. Theo took a breath. Hayes Vernon Industrial, he said. Private company. Based out of Pittsburgh originally, moved its headquarters to Ashford in 2011. Specialty industrial appliances, component manufacturing, some defense subcontracting. Owned by the Hayes family going back 4 generations. Current CEO is a man named David Hayes. His cousin owns a plurality of the voting shares, 38%. His cousin Logan. Logan Hayes, 32 years old. Took a leave of absence from the company in 2018 and has not, as far as any public filing indicates, returned to an operational role. Maintains his ownership interest, does not give interviews, does not attend public functions, is not, in any meaningful sense, a public figure. And Juniper Hill. Juniper Hill Partners was established in 2019 as a private investment vehicle under the administration of Bellamy and March. Its sole beneficial owner is a blind trust. The trust is funded by a single individual. Theo, I don't have definitive confirmation. I have a very strong pattern. The wire we received in 2021 from Juniper Hill for $80,000 was initiated within 4 hours of a memo being sent from a paralegal at Bellamy and March to a client identified only as LH. The same paralegal handles another 12 Juniper Hill transactions I was able to trace, all of them small, all of them early-stage companies run, it turns out, by women. Claire did not breathe. All of them? All the ones I could find. 11 companies, 5 in Ashford, 3 in the suburbs, 3 out of state, all small checks, 60 to 120,000, all of them at the exact moment the company was about to fail. Jesus, I didn't say that. I said that. Okay. She put her hands on the desk. She looked down at them. Her knuckles were white. Theo. Yeah. Close the door. It is closed. Closer. He walked 3 steps and sat down in the chair across from her. He did not say anything. He had worked for her for 3 years. He had never seen her look the way she looked now. I said something to him, she said, in line at the bank this morning. Okay. I told him the line was for the main counter. I implied he should use the ATM. I used the word small, as in, if you're cashing a check or something small. Okay. And his daughter heard me, Theo. She heard me. She's 6. She told him I was being mean, and he knelt down and told her that they didn't judge a whole person by 1 minute. She stopped. She looked up. And while he was saying that, I was standing 4 feet away pretending to be on my phone. Theo was quiet for a long moment. Claire. Yeah. What are you going to do? She shook her head. I don't know, she said. She left the office at 6:15. She had never, in 4 years of running her company, left the office at 6:15. She usually stayed until 9, sometimes 10, sometimes later, and she took a car service home to a 19th floor apartment in a building on the water with a doorman and a concierge and a view of the bridge. She realized as she walked out, no idea where she wanted to go. She ended up at Marlowe's Creamery. She could not have said why afterward. She had told the cab to take her home, and halfway there she had changed her mind, and she had gotten out 3 blocks from the creamery and walked the rest. The rain had stopped. The streets were wet and shining, and the air smelled like ozone and diesel and the faint sweetness of somebody's dryer vent. The creamery had a pink and white striped awning and a hand-painted sign. Inside there were 4 small tables. The woman behind the counter had a name tag that said Betty and a laugh line at the corner of her mouth that looked permanent. "You want something, hun?" "I don't know. Surprise me." "You don't look like a woman who gets surprised." "I usually am not." Betty laughed. "Okay, vanilla bean with the chocolate shell. That's my surprise." "Okay." She took the cone to a small table by the window. She sat down. She watched the light change on the wet pavement outside. She ate the ice cream slowly, the way she had not eaten ice cream since she was maybe 9 years old. She was wearing a camel coat that cost more than some people's rent, and she was sitting in a 4-table creamery eating vanilla bean with a chocolate shell, and she could not remember the last time she had done something in the middle of a weekday. That was not on her calendar. "Don't think I've seen you in here before." She looked up. Betty was leaning on the counter across the small room. "It's my first time. I can tell." "Can you?" "Regulars sit at the corner table. You sat at the window." "Ah. You from around here?" "Lincoln Park." Betty's eyebrows went up. "Long way for a scoop." "It was a strange day." Betty nodded slowly, as though she had heard a version of that sentence many times before. "You know what I find? Strange days, they either make you or break you, and the thing is you don't find out which until about a year later." "That's a depressing thought." "Is it? I find it freeing." "How?" "Well, means you don't have to figure it out today." Claire looked at her. The woman had kind eyes. They were the kind of eyes that had seen a great many people eat ice cream alone at a small table by a window, and had not yet run out of patience with any of them. "A man came in here this morning," Claire said, "with a little girl, dark hair about this tall, green canvas coat. He had—" She swallowed. "He had a hole in his boot." Betty's face did something. It moved once, very slightly. Then it settled. "I know the man." "You know him?" "I know him. I've known him for a few years. He comes in every few weeks, sometimes every week if his little one's had a tough go of it." "Does he?" "He does." Claire's voice caught. "He's a regular?" "He's a good one." Claire looked down at her ice cream. It had started to drip onto her fingers. She did not wipe it off. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." Is he what he looks like?" Betty tilted her head. "What does he look like?" I don't know anymore." Betty smiled. It was a very small smile, and it had in it the particular gentleness of a woman who had worked a counter for 3 decades and had learned, somewhere along the way, when a stranger needed a word and when a stranger needed to be let alone. "Hun," she said, "I'll tell you what I tell everybody who asks me about Logan. He's the kind of man who leaves a $3 tip on a $10 bill and puts it in the jar like he's embarrassed anyone might notice. Whatever else he is, I don't know. That's not mine to know. But that part I know." Claire nodded. She nodded again. She finished her ice cream slowly, and she paid in cash, and she left a 20 in the tip jar that Betty did not notice her put there, and she walked out into the damp evening on 4th Street with her coat open and her hair going curly at the ends from the humidity. She did not that night call Logan Hayes. She did not that night reach out to Harold Okafor or Bellamy and March or any of the 12 paralegals or founders or lawyers who could have confirmed what she already knew. She walked instead for a very long time, down 4th, up Mercer, past the bank with its tall glass doors now dark, past the corner where she had, at 10:30 that morning, first laid eyes on a man in a canvas jacket and decided she knew everything about him. She stopped at the corner. She stood there for a long time. And somewhere, inside a 3rd-floor walk-up on Ellery Street, Logan Hayes was washing a small purple mouth with a warm washcloth and pulling a blanket up to a small chin and turning off a small lamp and thinking, as he stood in the doorway of a child's bedroom, that he had been very lucky that day, and not for any of the reasons the people in the bank might have thought. The door was still half open behind him. Ava's voice came, soft, from the dark. "Daddy." "Hmm? I'm glad we got ice cream." "Me too, baby." "And I'm glad about the lady." He paused. "What about her?" A long pause. A child thinking. I'm glad she was there. So you could say the thing to me. About the minute. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Go to sleep, baby. Okay, Daddy. He pulled the door almost shut, and he walked down the hall, and he sat on the edge of the old couch in the living room with the dishwasher valve in one hand and his cracked phone in the other, and he did not notice, for a very long time, that he had not moved. He sat there on the couch for a long time, with the valve in one hand and the phone in the other, and he only moved when the heat in the radiator kicked on with its familiar rattling cough and startled him back into the room. He set the valve on the coffee table. He set the phone beside it. He rubbed his face with both hands, hard, the way a man does when he is trying to press something back inside himself that has no business coming out. The apartment was quiet, in the way that only a small apartment with a sleeping child can be quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The pipes clicked. Somewhere above him, Mrs. Delgado was watching a game show with the volume too high, and the canned laughter came through the ceiling in a thin, comforting burr. He had not said the woman's name out loud. He had not let himself think it while Ava was awake. But she had been there, the whole afternoon, moving at the edge of his mind like someone waiting in a hallway. The camel coat, the tightness around her mouth, the way she had not turned around when Ava said the word mean, but had held herself very still, the way a person held themselves when something had landed. He had recognized her, not her face. He did not know her face. He knew the name. He had known it the moment he'd walked into the bank and seen her standing there, because he had, 4 years ago, signed his initials on a wire instruction to a company called Whitmore Logistics, and the memo line on that wire had said, LH-Whitmore, and when a man has done a thing like that, he remembers. He had not done it because he believed in her. He had not, at that point, known a thing about her. What he had known was that a paralegal at Bellamy in March had forwarded him a one-page memo from a junior associate, and the memo had described a 24-year-old woman running a logistics startup out of a rented garage in an industrial park on the east side of the city. And the memo had said that she was 3 weeks from insolvency, and that her lead investor had pulled out because the investor's wife had gone to college with a man whose company was in the same space, and the memo had included, at the bottom, a single sentence. The founder is unusually capable. The failure here is not hers. He had read it on a Tuesday morning in a kitchen much like this one, with a 2-year-old on his hip, and he had said fine, and he had signed the wire, and he had not thought signed the wire, and he had not thought about it again until a woman in a camel coat had suggested, in a voice polished to a shine, that he might want to use the ATM outside. He did not know what he was supposed to feel about that. He did not, if he was being honest, feel much of anything about the $80,000. He had given away more than that in a dozen quiet places to a dozen people whose names he had mostly already forgotten. The money had never been the point. It had never even really felt like his. The money had belonged to a house he no longer lived in and a life he no longer wanted, and he had been, in the years since, trying to find quiet places to put it where it would do more good than it had done him. What he felt, instead, was tired. He felt tired the way a man feels tired when he has spent 8 years building a very small, very careful life, and someone has, in the space of a single morning, walked into the middle of it. Claire did not sleep. She did not really try. She lay on her back in her bed on the 19th floor, with the blinds half drawn and the bridge lights throwing slow, swimming rectangles on her ceiling, and she went through the morning again and again and again, the way a person tongues a chipped tooth. The way she had said this line is for the main teller counter, the way she had said something small, the way her phone had been in her hand the whole time, and how she had, at one point, actually glanced at her reflection in its darkened screen and straightened the collar of her coat, because even in a moment of small private cruelty she had wanted to look composed. At 3 in the morning, she got up and made a pot of coffee and sat at her kitchen island in a t-shirt and leggings, staring at the printout Theo had handed her. LH-Whitmore. 11 companies, all women founders, all at the moment of failure. She thought about what it meant to be that kind of person and to live in a 2-bedroom walk-up on Ellery Street. She thought about what it meant to have, apparently, enough money that a senior bank manager walked out of a frosted glass office for a $50 withdrawal, and to use that money, over and over, to quietly carry other people across the gap that separated possible from impossible, and to never, not once, have asked for anything in return. Not a name on a building. not a seat on a board, not even an acknowledgement in a press release. She thought about her own press releases. She had, over 4 years, put out exactly 19 of them. She knew the count because she had, at one point, had a small framed copy of the first one hung on her office wall. Whitmore Logistics announces Series Seed, led by Anonymous Fund. She had stood in front of it, she remembered, on the morning after it ran, and she had said to Theo, "You see this? Someone believed in us before anyone else would even take my calls." And Theo had said something nice back, and she had taken a picture of herself in front of it for her personal Instagram, and she had captioned the picture Day 1 with a little black heart, and 211 people had liked it. She stood up from the kitchen island and she walked barefoot to her living room, and she took that framed press release off the wall. She looked at it for a long time. Then she turned it around so it faced the wall, and she set it back on its hook. She was in the office at 5:45 in the morning. The cleaning crew was still there. A woman with headphones in was vacuuming the lobby and did not look up. Claire badged in, rode the elevator alone, and sat down at her desk with the overhead lights still off and the only light coming from the glow of her monitors and the pre-dawn gray outside the windows. She did something she had not done in 4 years of running the company. She opened a blank document. She did not open her email. She did not open her calendar. She did not open the deck she was supposed to be revising for Marshall's Friday call. She opened a blank document and she titled it Letter. And she sat there with her hands on the keyboard and she did not type anything for 20 minutes. Then she typed, "Mr. Hayes." She looked at that for a long time. She deleted it. She typed, "Logan." She deleted that. She typed, "I'm writing this because I don't know how else to reach you, and also because I don't know that I should reach you. I don't know your address. I don't know your phone number. I don't know whether what I learned yesterday is something I'm allowed to have learned. I don't know if I'm writing this letter to send it or writing it to be done with it." She stopped. She read it back. It was, she thought, the most honest thing she had written in a long time. It was also, she suspected, completely useless as a letter. She kept typing. "I was raised by a very hard man. He was not cruel, but he was not kind either, and the distinction mattered less than I used to think. He taught me that the only thing anyone in this world respects is a person who does not waste their own time. He taught me that a person who has not figured out how to be efficient is a person who has not yet decided to matter." I believed him. I still believe him, a little. I don't think I will ever completely stop believing him. But yesterday your daughter said I was being mean, and she was right, and I have spent the last 16 hours trying to understand how a 6-year-old can see something in me that I have spent 28 years not seeing in myself. She stopped typing. She stared at the screen. She saved the document. She did not title it anything new. She closed her laptop. She put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She was not the kind of person who cried particularly, and this was not, she understood, the kind of moment for it. But she sat there with her face in her hands for a long time, and when Theo came in at 7:30 with 2 coffees, she was still sitting like that, and he set the coffee on her desk and did not say anything. "Theo." "Yeah." "Cancel Marshall Friday." "What?" "Cancel Marshall Friday. Push him to next week. Tell him something came up." "Claire." "I can't pitch a Series B right now. I need a week." "He's going to think we're unraveling. Let him think it." Theo was quiet. He sat down slowly in the chair across from her. He took the lid off his coffee. He blew on it. He put the lid back on. "Okay," he said. "I'll call him." "Thank you." "You going to tell me what's going on?" "No." "Okay." He drank his coffee. She drank hers. Outside the window, the sun came up and the wet city turned gold at its edges for about 6 minutes, and then the gray rolled back in, and the day started. By 10 o'clock, she had done what she'd told herself. For 16 hours, she was not going to do. She had found the address. It had not, in the end, taken very much. Ashford was a city of about 400,000 people, and the property records were public, and a man named Logan Hayes, who held a share of a private industrial company, had an LLC through which he owned a small 2-bedroom walk-up on Ellery Street. And Claire was, among other things, very good at filings. She stood in her office with her coat on, her handbag over her shoulder, and a plain white envelope in her hand. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. On the sheet of paper were 11 sentences, written by hand, in the small, sharp print she'd used all her life. She had written it 3 times before she'd gotten a version she could live with. She did not know if she was going to knock. She did not know if she was going to leave the envelope under the door. She did not know if she was going to stand across the street for an hour and then get back in the cab. She did not know. She got in the cab anyway. Ellery Street was narrow. The building was brick, 4 stories, with a wrought iron fire escape running up the front and a row of 3 buzzers by a chipped blue door. She stood on the sidewalk across the way, in her camel coat, with her handbag over her shoulder and the envelope in her hand, and she watched the building for about 20 minutes, and she thought, the whole time, that she would know what she was going to do when the moment came. The moment came at 11:18. The blue door opened and Logan Hayes came out. He was carrying a small paper bag from a hardware store. He had on the same canvas jacket. He had on the same boots, although the hole in the left one was now patched with what looked like duct tape. He had on a gray knit cap that he had not been wearing in the bank, and it made him look, for a moment, younger than he had looked the day before. He was alone. He crossed the street at the corner on the walk signal, and he did not see her, and she stood there frozen as he moved past her at a distance of maybe 30 feet. She let him walk 2 blocks. Then she followed him. She did not think of it as following. She thought of it as going in the same direction. She had told herself, in the cab, that she would not do this, and she did it anyway. It turned out there were a great many things she had told herself over 28 years that she had, when it came down to it, done anyway. He went into a hardware store. She stood on the sidewalk across the street, and she watched him through the window. She watched him walk to an aisle in the back and pick up a small part, she could not see what it was, and carry it to the counter and pay in cash, and nod to the man behind the counter, and tuck the change into his coat pocket and come back out onto the street. He saw her when he came out. He did not startle. He did not do anything, in fact, that a person watching closely would have read as surprise. He simply stopped on the sidewalk with the paper bag in one hand, and he looked across the street at her, and she looked back at him. And for a long moment the city carried on around them without knowing that anything had happened at all. Then he walked across the street. He did not hurry. He waited for the light. He crossed when it changed, and he came up onto the sidewalk beside her, and he stopped about 4 feet away, and he set the paper bag down by his boot. "Ms. Whitmore," he said. She tried to say something. Nothing came. He waited. "How?" she said finally. "How did you—" "I knew you yesterday, in the bank." He paused. "I signed your wire in 2021. She closed her eyes. She opened them. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You don't." "I do." "Ms. Whitmore." Claire. "Claire, you don't owe me an apology. I'm not the person you owe an apology to." "Who—" "My daughter." Claire flinched. He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way a man said a thing that he had thought about for 22 hours, carefully, and had decided was the truest thing he could offer her. He said it the way a man said a thing that was not meant to wound her, but was not meant to spare her either. "She's 6, he said. "She's going to remember what you said for a long time. She's not going to remember it because of what it was. She's going to remember it because of where she was standing when she heard it." He paused. "You don't owe me anything. I have $80,000. I had $80,000. That's not an amount of money that matters to me. But Ava doesn't have anywhere else to stand. And when you spoke, she was standing next to me and she heard you." Claire nodded. She did not try to speak. "I came here," she said, "to give you this." She held out the envelope. He looked at it. He did not take it. "What is it?" "A letter." "What does it say?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. "I don't remember," she said. "I wrote it at 6 in the morning. I think I said some things that are true. I don't know if they're the right things." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and he took the envelope. He did not open it. He folded it once, and he slid it into the inside pocket of his canvas jacket, next to the wallet with the small silver monogram on the black debit card, and he zipped the pocket and he nodded at her once, the way a man nods at a stranger who has told him her name. "I won't read it today," he said. "Okay. I might not read it for a while." "Okay. But I'll read it." "Okay." He bent down. He picked up the paper bag. He settled it under his arm. "There's a creamery on 4th Street," he said. "Woman named Betty runs it. If you want to come back sometime and sit at the counter and talk to her, she knew me before you did. She might be able to tell you some things about me that I can't tell you myself." He paused. "That would be a better place for you and me than this sidewalk." "Okay. You going to be all right getting back?" "Yes." "Good." He did not smile. He did not shake her hand. He simply nodded at her, and he stepped around her, and he walked away down Ellery Street toward the blue door of the building where his 6-year-old daughter was, in the next half hour going to come home from school and ask him what was in the bag. And he was going to say, "A new valve for Mrs. Delgado's dishwasher," and Ava was going to say boring, and he was going to laugh. Claire stood on the sidewalk until he turned the corner. Then she walked. She walked all the way back to her office. It was 43 blocks. She did not take a cab. She arrived at her building at 1:10 in the afternoon with blistered feet and damp eyes and her camel coat open at the throat, and she rode the elevator up to the 16th floor, and she walked into Theo's office without knocking. "Theo." He looked up. "Call Marshall back," she said. "Tell him Friday is on. Tell him I'll be there at 9. I changed my mind. I know what I'm pitching now." "What are you pitching?" She paused. She looked out his window at the wet gray city. "Something different," she said. "That's not an answer." "I know." She walked out of his office, and she walked into her own, and she sat down at her desk, and she opened the blank document titled Letter, and she read it once more, and then she closed it, and she opened a new one, and she began, for the first time in her professional life, to write something she did not yet know the shape of. Somewhere across the city, on the 3rd floor of a walk-up on Ellery Street, a small envelope sat in the inside pocket of a canvas jacket hung on a hook by a door, and the jacket smelled faintly of rain, and the apartment was quiet, and on the kitchen floor a man was fitting a new valve into an old dishwasher, and he was, for the first time in a long time, humming. He hummed until Mrs. Delgado came down the stairs in her slippers to ask if the dishwasher was going to live, and then he stopped humming because Mrs. Delgado did not approve of humming in professional settings, which she considered her kitchen to be. "Well, it'll live another 5 years. 5. Maybe 6. The drum's going eventually, but the valve was the real problem." Mrs. Delgado was 71. She had on a pink house robe and a pair of reading glasses pushed up into hair that had been, at some point in the Reagan administration, the same color as the robe. She put her hands on her hips. "How much?" 80. 80. She squinted at him. "Logan Hayes, you are a liar." "I am not." "You are. That valve cost $34. I know because my sister-in-law just replaced hers in June, and she complained about it for a week." Mrs. Delgado. 80. "I spent 2 hours on the floor of your kitchen, and you would have spent 2 hours on my kitchen floor for free if I hadn't stopped you." He smiled, a tired smile, and he did not argue with her because she was, as she always was, correct. 80, he said again. She made a sound that was not quite a word, and she shuffled over to the windowsill, and she lifted the jar of pennies, and she counted out $80 in small bills, which he accepted without comment, and she slapped his hand lightly as he tucked them into his pocket. "Bring the child down for supper on Sunday," she said. "I will. I'm making pollo guisado. She'll love it. She'll eat the rice and push the chicken around. She'll love it." He left the dishwasher panel where it was, and he went back up the stairs. And when he got to his own apartment door, he stopped for a moment with his hand on the knob, because the envelope in his coat pocket had, in the last hour, begun to feel heavier than it should have. He did not take it out. He hung the coat on the hook by the door. He went into the kitchen and started heating up last night's soup, because Ava would be home from school in 25 minutes, and she liked her soup in a specific blue bowl with a specific small spoon, and the soup had to be warm but not hot, because she had once burned her tongue and had not yet, at 6, forgiven the concept of heat. He did not read the letter that afternoon. He did not read it that night either, after Ava went to bed. He sat on the couch in the dark with it in his lap for a long time, turning the envelope over in his hands, and then he put it in the drawer of the side table, under a stack of takeout menus he never called from, and he closed the drawer, and he went to bed. He had lived long enough to know that some letters did not need to be read in the first 24 hours. He had lived long enough to know that most of them didn't. But Claire's Friday pitch did not go the way she had planned it, for the simple reason that she had not, in the end, planned it. She walked into Marshall Cade's conference room at 9 in the morning with no deck. She had a single sheet of paper folded twice in the pocket of her blazer. Her hair was down. She had not slept very much in 3 nights. Marshall was already sitting at the head of the table with his arms crossed, and 2 of his associates were on either side of him, and all 3 of them watched her set her bag on an empty chair and sit down without opening her laptop. No deck today? No deck. Marshall raised one eyebrow. Claire, we're prepared to write a $10 million check. I know. We usually like to see numbers when we do that. I sent you numbers on Monday. They haven't changed. Then what are we doing? She looked at him. She looked at the 2 associates. The one on the left was a man in his late 20s with an expensive watch. The one on the right was a woman maybe 2 years younger than Claire, with a tight smile and a laptop open in front of her. And Claire knew, without being told, that the woman on the right was the one who would decide whether the check got written. She had been that woman at that table 100 times in her career on the other side.
Marshall, Claire said, can I ask you something? You keep doing that. I know. It's starting to be a tell. I know. He sighed. He uncrossed his arms. He gestured a little grandly for her to go on. When you look at me, Claire said, at this table, what do you see? Marshall paused. That's a strange question. Humor me. He studied her. He took a moment. He was, for all his flat effect, a man who took a question seriously when it was offered seriously.
I see a founder with a good business, he said. Tight margins, aggressive growth, a team that works harder than their competitors. I see a woman who, if I had to guess, has not taken a vacation in 3 years. I see somebody who is about 12 months from burnout if nobody around her slows her down. Claire nodded. What else? Claire, what else? He paused longer this time. Longer. I see somebody, he said, slowly, who I have been trying to figure out for 3 meetings, whether she believes her own pitch. The air in the room shifted. The young woman on the right closed her laptop, very softly. The young man on the left stopped looking at his phone. I don't, Claire said. You don't what? I don't believe my own pitch, not all of it. I believe the business. I believe the unit economics. I believe we can take a quarter of this market in 3 years if we deploy the capital correctly. I do not believe the version of me that I have been performing in these rooms. I have been performing that version for 4 years, Marshall. I performed it so well that until very recently I thought it was me. Marshall did not say anything. I came in here on Monday, Claire said, and I told you a story about a man in a bank. I did not plan to tell you that story. I told you because I had just, for the first time in a long time, been seen by a 6-year-old, and she saw something I did not know was there. But I'm just from. She paused. She told her father I was being mean, and when he knelt down to talk to her about it, he did not defend me. He did not condemn me either. He just told her that we don't judge a whole person by 1 minute. And I have been... She stopped. She pressed her fingertips flat against the table. I have been thinking about that for 4 days. About what it would mean to actually run a company by the rule that we don't judge a whole person by 1 minute. About what it would mean to build a business whose founder did not treat her own employees like minutes she was trying to recover. About what it would mean to be the kind of CEO who, when a man in a torn coat walked into a conference room, assumed he was worth her time. She looked up. I'm not asking you to fund a different company, Marshall. Whitmore Logistics is the same company it was on Monday. The model is the same. The numbers are the same. What I'm asking you to fund is a founder who, as of this morning, is going to run it differently. The room was quiet for a long moment. The young man on the left glanced sideways at Marshall. The young woman on the right had not moved. Marshall leaned back in his chair. He tapped one finger on the table, slow, twice, the way he had on Monday. Claire. Yes. That's the worst pitch I have ever heard in this room. Her stomach dropped. And, he said, it's the first one in a year that's made me want to write the check today instead of on Friday. She did not smile. She did not know how to smile yet. She simply let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like a week. Let me talk to my partners, Marshall said. I'll call you Monday. Thank you. Don't thank me. I haven't said yes. You will. He laughed.
It was a short, rough, surprised laugh. Get out of my office, Whitmore. She got.
The call came Monday at 2:15 in the afternoon. 10 million. Terms she had not had to negotiate down from. A board seat for Marshall, but not a control provision. A 2-year runway that, if she did not burn it, would take Whitmore Logistics to a Series C on her own terms. She took the call standing at the window of her office, looking out over the city, and when she hung up, she did not call her father. She did not call her college roommate. She did not call any of the people she had, 4 days earlier, been planning to call in the event of a yes. She walked down the hallway to Theo's office, and she knocked on the open door, and she said, "Marshall said yes." Theo looked up. He had 3 monitors open, a sandwich in one hand, and a smear of mustard on his thumb. "No." "Yes." "Jesus, Claire." "Don't." "Sorry. Wow." "Thank you." "Are you going to eat?" He paused. He set the sandwich down. He wiped his thumb on a napkin. "Are you okay?" She looked at him for a moment. And then, because he was the first person who had asked her that question in a week, and because he had been asking her that question in small, quiet ways for 3 years, and because he had been the only person in her professional life who had ever, even once, treated her like a whole person instead of a line on his calendar, she sat down in the chair across from his desk, and she put her face in her hands, and for the first time since she had been maybe 15 years old, she cried. Theo did not move. He did not say anything. He sat there very still, the way a man sits when he understands that the thing happening in front of him is not a problem to solve. She cried for maybe 90 seconds. It was not a pretty cry. It was the cry of a woman who had been carrying something heavier than she'd realized for a longer time than she'd understood, and had finally, on a Monday afternoon in her office, set it down. When she stopped, she took the tissue he had, without comment, slid across the desk, and she wiped her face, and she took a breath, and she said, "I have a thing I need to do. I'll be back in an hour." Take 2. "I'll be back in an hour." Claire. "Yes." Take 2. She nodded. She got up. She walked out of his office and out of the building, and she did not take a cab. Marlowe's Creamery had 2 people in it at 3:30 on a Monday afternoon, both of them a pair of teenagers in the corner who were not looking at their ice cream or at each other. Betty was behind the counter in the same apron she had been wearing the week before, and when Claire walked in, Betty looked up and her face did something small that was not quite a smile. Vanilla bean. Vanilla bean. Claire sat at the counter this time instead of the window. Betty did not ring her up right away. She scooped the ice cream, she did the chocolate shell, she set it on a small plate with a napkin folded under it, and she slid it across. "He was in here yesterday," Betty said. Claire did not ask who. "Was he?" "With the little one. She had rainbow and strawberry again. She's very consistent. She told me on Friday, apparently, that she was going to have rainbow and strawberry every time for the rest of her life." Betty's face did move now. It was a small smile. "You saw her." "I didn't see her. Logan told me. I saw him on the street 2 weeks ago. For about 90 seconds. That's all I've had." Claire took a spoonful of her ice cream. She did not eat it. She held the spoon over the plate, and she watched the ice cream drip off the edge of it, and she said quietly, "He hasn't written back. Did you ask him to write back?" "No." "Well then." I know. It's just..." She set the spoon down. "I thought something was supposed to happen. I wrote him a letter. I stood on the sidewalk on Ellery Street. I followed him to a hardware store. I made a speech at a venture capitalist about his daughter, and he hasn't written back, and he hasn't called, and I don't know if he's read the letter, and I don't know if I'm supposed to do something else, or if I'm supposed to let it go." Betty leaned her elbows on the counter. She studied Claire. "Honora?" "Yes." "Can I tell you something that's going to sound rude?" "Yes." "You're still making this about you." Claire was quiet. "He's not going to write you back," Betty said. "Not the way you want him to. He's not going to show up with a grand speech. He's not going to invite you to dinner. He's not going to give you a moment where you get to feel forgiven. That's not who he is. I've known him 5 years, and I've never once seen him give anybody that. Not because he's cold. He's not cold. But because the thing you're looking for, somebody to stand in front of you and tell you you're a good person now, he doesn't have that to give. Nobody does. That's not a thing another person can give you. Bimbas. Claire looked at her. Then what do I do? You eat your ice cream. Betty, I'm serious. You eat your ice cream and you go back to work and you do the thing you told that investor you were going to do. And in a month or two, when you're not thinking about it every 5 minutes, you come back in here and you sit at this counter, and one of these afternoons, Logan will be sitting 2 stools down with his girl, and he'll nod at you, and you'll nod back, and that'll be the whole thing. That's what it looks like, hun. That's what all of it looks like in real life. The rest is TV. Claire put her hands flat on the counter. She looked down at them. That's going to be very hard, she said. I know. I'm not good at that. I know. Claire picked up the spoon. She ate a bite of the vanilla bean. It was sweet and cold, and it had small flecks of black vanilla seed in it that tasted faintly of something she could not have named. Thank you, Betty. I mean it. Oh, honey, I didn't do anything. I just pour the ice cream. That's the whole gig. Claire laughed. It was small, but it was real. It was, she realized, maybe the first time she had laughed in a week. She finished her ice cream at the counter. She paid in cash. She put another 20 in the tip jar, and Betty, this time, saw her do it. And Betty gave her a look but did not say anything, and Claire walked back out onto 4th Street and walked the 43 blocks back to her office, because it had become, somehow, in the last few weeks, the thing she did now. Logan read the letter on a Wednesday. He read it sitting on the couch in the living room after Ava had gone to bed. The radiator was clicking. Somewhere above him, Mrs. Delgado was watching a rerun of a courtroom show. He had the side table drawer open and the takeout menus in his lap and the envelope in his hand, and he sat there for a long time before he broke the seal with his thumb. The letter was short. It was shorter than he'd expected. She had written it by hand in a small, sharp print, and it fit on a single sheet of paper. He read it once through, slowly. Then he read it again. Mr. Hayes, you don't owe me the courtesy of reading this. I want you to know, before anything else, that I'm writing it because I need to have written it, not because I need you to have read it. If you put it in a drawer and never open it, that's fine. It'll have done what I needed it to do by the time you close the drawer. I said something to you in a bank a few days ago, and I said it in front of your daughter. I have thought about it every hour since. I was tired, and I was running late to something I thought mattered more than a man with a torn coat, and I made a small calculation about who you were and how much of my attention you were worth. I was wrong, but I want to be clear about what I was wrong about. I was not wrong about how much money you had. I didn't know how much money you had. I was wrong about how much you were worth, which I assumed I knew from looking at you for 30 seconds, and which I'm now not sure I've ever known about anyone, including myself. I learned the day after what you did for my company in 2021. I won't pretend I don't know. I also won't thank you for it, because I don't think that's what you did it for, and a thank you right now would be me trying to close a loop that I don't think is mine to close. What I want to say is this. I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to be the kind of person who, if she had been the one in the torn coat at the bank, would have been worth a man like you kneeling down to his daughter to defend. I don't know if I'll get there. I know I've been going the wrong way for a long time. But I saw something in you that morning, in you and in her, and I am turning around as of this week and walking a different direction. I don't need a reply. I don't need anything. I just needed you to know there's someone in the city, 8 blocks from your apartment, trying to be better because of you. Claire Whitmore. He read it a third time, then he folded the letter carefully, and he put it back in the envelope, and he sat there for a long time with the envelope in his lap and his hand flat on top of it. He did not cry. He did not feel like crying. He felt, instead, something quieter and older than crying. He felt the particular weight a person felt when they were reminded that the small, careful, private life they had built was not, in fact, as private as they had believed it to be. That the things they did in the corners were sometimes watched. That the people they moved past in banks and on sidewalks were sometimes changed by them. He had not wanted to be watched. He had built the life on Ellery Street precisely in order not to be watched. But he thought, sitting there with her letter on his knee, that maybe he had been wrong about that too. Maybe there was a version of being watched that was not the same thing as being seen. Maybe a young woman in a camel coat sitting at the counter of a creamery eating vanilla bean was not watching him at all. Maybe she was watching herself, and he had just happened to be the mirror she had found. He put the envelope back in the drawer. He did not that night write her back. He did not that month write her back. He thought about it 3 or 4 times, and he did not, because he did not have anything to say that she had not already said to herself, and because he had meant it when he told her, on the sidewalk, that she did not owe him an apology. But he began, the next morning, to do a small thing he had not done in 8 years. When he walked past the mirror in the hallway on his way to wake Ava up, he looked into it, briefly, the way a man looks at a person he has not met in a while, and he nodded at himself. It was not much. It was the beginning of something, though. He knew it when he did it, and he did not pretend otherwise. The beginning of something was a small thing, and small things he had found were almost always the ones that lasted. The weeks went on, but the rain let up. By the first week of May, Ashford had turned green almost overnight, the way that city did every year, with the trees on Mercer Avenue coming into leaf in a matter of 3 days, and the patios on 4th Street putting their chairs back out. Ava lost her first tooth on a Thursday, buried the tooth in the pot of the jade plant on the windowsill because she had decided that fairies were inefficient and she would prefer to grow a tooth tree. And Logan, who had been instructed by his daughter not to laugh, laughed anyway, and she forgave him by the following Tuesday. Claire's company closed the Series B on a Friday in late April. The paperwork was less dramatic than she had expected. She signed her name 16 times, and Theo signed his name 4 times. And Marshall Cade sent a bottle of something expensive to her office, along with a note in his thin, angular handwriting that read, simply, "Don't prove me wrong." She put the note in her desk drawer under the press release that now faced the wall, and she did not open the bottle. She had begun, in the weeks since her walk to Ellery Street, to do a series of things she had never done before, and she had begun to do them badly. She had instituted, on the first Monday of the month, a standing company-wide meeting that was not about numbers. She did not know what to call it, so she simply called it Monday. She sat on the edge of a desk in the open area of the office, in front of her 14 employees, and she asked them to tell her what they were seeing that she was not. The first Monday had been painful. 3 people had spoken. 2 of them had told her things that had made her wince. One of them, a man in the operations group named Darius, who had worked for her for 2 years and had, in those 2 years, spoken to her personally maybe 11 times, had told her that the way she had handled a client escalation in March had made him consider quitting. She had listened. She had not defended herself. At the end of the meeting, she had thanked them, and she had walked into her office, and she had sat with her back to the door for 10 minutes, and then she had come back out, and she had gone to Darius's desk, and she had apologized to him, by name, in front of the 2 people sitting nearest him, and she had asked him if he would have a coffee with her sometime that week. He had said yes. The coffee had been awkward. She had not, it turned out, gotten good at this yet. But she had made it, and she had kept making the Monday meetings, and by the 3rd one of them, 5 people spoke, and by the 5th one, everyone did. And somewhere in between, a thing in the office began to shift that Claire could feel but could not have articulated, the way you could feel the weather change before a storm. Theo noticed first. "You know what's weird?" he said, one Thursday afternoon in the kitchen of the office, while they were both waiting for the coffee maker. "What?" "People are staying." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we haven't had a resignation in 6 weeks. That hasn't happened since we were 11 people. And I had 2 calls this week from people who used to work here asking if there were openings." She looked at him. "Who?" "Maya from the dispatch team left last July. And Rohan, the engineer I hired in year 2, left in the fall. Both of them said they'd heard things were different." "Different. Different. Different how?" "They didn't say. They just said different." He took his coffee off the machine. "I'm telling you this, by the way, not because I think you should take a victory lap. I'm telling you because I think you're about to do the thing where you ask me if I'm lying to make you feel better, and I'm not." "I wasn't going to ask that." "Yes, you were." "Okay." "Okay." She took her coffee. She went back to her office. She sat down. She did not cry this time. She did not, she noticed, need to. Logan saw her for the first time at the creamery in the middle of June. It was a Saturday afternoon, around 4. He had taken Ava there after a soccer practice that Ava had, as usual, mostly ignored in favor of making a crown out of clover with another 6-year-old on the sideline. Ava had rainbow and strawberry. Logan had black coffee. They were sitting at the small table by the window, which was now the table Betty had come to think of as theirs. And Ava was telling him, very seriously, about a disagreement she had had that morning with Marcus, which had concerned the rules of a game that Marcus had, in Ava's opinion, invented on the spot to make himself win. Claire came in at 4:11. She did not see them at first. She went to the counter, ordered vanilla bean with the chocolate shell, chatted briefly with Betty in a way that suggested she had been doing this for some time now, and then she turned with her plate in her hand and she saw them. She froze for just a second. Then she nodded. Logan nodded back. Ava, who missed very little, looked up from her cone. Daddy. That's the lady. I know. Should I say hi? He considered this. He thought about it carefully, in the small, quiet way he thought about things that involved his daughter. You don't have to, he said. But you can, if you want to. Ava thought about it. She licked a stripe of strawberry off the side of her cone. Then she slid off her chair, and she walked, very small and very purposeful, across the creamery to the stool where Claire had just sat down. Claire watched her come with the expression of a woman watching a judge walk into a courtroom. Hi, Ava said. Hi. I'm Ava. I know. My daddy said we don't judge a whole person by 1 minute. He's right about that. So I'm going to give you a different minute. Claire was quiet. Her mouth opened and did not immediately make a sound. Okay, she said. Thank you, Ava. You're welcome. Ava examined her solemnly. Are you a nice person now? I'm trying. Okay. That's what my daddy says to do. Your daddy's a smart man. He's okay. Ava shrugged with the casual cruelty of children who did not yet understand what a compliment was for. He doesn't know how to do ponytails very good. They're always lumpy. I could show him. Really? I did my own hair every day until I was 13. I know some tricks. Ava turned and hollered across the creamery in the way only a 6-year-old could, which was to say without any regard at all for the other customers. Daddy, she knows ponytails. Logan, at the table by the window, did not move. His coffee cup was halfway to his mouth. 2 teenagers in the back booth were staring. Betty, behind the counter, was doing a thing with her rag that was meant to look like wiping, but was, in fact, watching. Okay, baby, Logan called. Inside voices. But she knows ponytails. I heard you. Ava turned back to Claire. You can come over, she said, if you want. Claire looked at the child. Then she looked, past the child, at Logan. Logan, after a beat, nodded. Just once. Claire picked up her ice cream. She slid off the stool. She crossed the creamery behind Ava, who was chattering now about a trick that Marcus's mother did with a comb and a rubber band, and she stopped about 2 feet from Logan's table. Is this okay? It's okay. She sat down. It was, for about 30 seconds, a deeply uncomfortable thing. The table was small. Ava's ice cream was dripping. Logan's coffee was cold. Claire was holding her plate in her lap because there was nowhere to put it, and she did not know what to say, and Logan did not know what to say. And the entire weight of what had happened in that bank in April was sitting on top of them like an uninvited fourth guest. Ava broke it. You want some of my rainbow? Claire blinked. Oh, I'm okay, honey. I have vanilla. Vanilla's boring. It's my favorite. Why? Claire paused. She considered the question seriously, the way a person ought to consider questions from children. I think because it tastes like the thing itself, she said, without trying to be anything else. Ava considered this. That's a good reason, she said. Thank you. You can have some of my rainbow anyway? Okay. Ava held the cone out. Claire took a small ceremonial lick off the side and declared it excellent, and Ava nodded with the satisfaction of a 6-year-old whose judgment had been vindicated. And she sat back in her chair and she worked on her cone, and she began to tell Claire about Marcus and the game and the specific injustice of having to play a game whose rules were being invented in real time by the person playing it against you. Claire listened. She asked 2 follow-up questions that were, Logan noted, the exact right questions. She did not condescend. She did not perform. She listened the way a person who had decided, recently and deliberately, to learn how to listen, listened, which was to say clumsily, carefully, and with her whole attention. Logan watched her. When Ava ran out of breath on the Marcus situation, Claire turned just slightly to him. "I got the Series B," she said. "Quiet, not a performance." "I know." "You know? I read the paper sometimes." "Right. Congratulations." "Thank you." He drank his cold coffee. She ate a bite of her vanilla bean. Ava, between them, was working her cone with the intensity of a craftsman. "I've been doing some things," Claire said. "Betty told me." "She did." "She tells me most things." "Of course she does." "She's good at telling things." Claire smiled. It was a small smile. And it was not for him particularly, it was for the general shape of her life in that moment, and for the fact that she was sitting at a small table in a creamery with a man she had once insulted, eating vanilla bean next to his daughter, and that she was, for the first time in a very long time, not trying to make the moment into anything other than what it was. "I didn't come here looking for you today," she said. "I know. I just come here sometimes." "I know." "I wanted to say that." "I know." She nodded. They sat there, the three of them, at the small table by the window. Outside, a man walked past with a dog that was wearing a sweater, even though it was 68 degrees, and Ava noticed the dog and laughed, and the three of them watched it go by. And nobody at the table said anything for about 40 seconds, and the silence was, for the first time since they had met each other, not uncomfortable. Claire finished her ice cream. She stood up. She took her plate to the counter, thanked Betty, came back to the table. "Ava?" "Yes?" "It was very nice to officially meet you." "You too." Ava considered something. "Your hair's pretty." "Thank you." "My daddy says my hair is pretty every day, but I think he has to say that because he's my daddy." "I think he says it because it's true." Ava shrugged. She was satisfied. She went back to her cone. Claire turned to Logan. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Hayes. You too, Miss Whitmore." "Claire." "Claire." She nodded once. She went out the door. The bell rang. Through the window, they watched her walk down 4th Street in the late afternoon light, her shadow long on the sidewalk. And she did not turn around, and she did not look back. And Logan thought, watching her go, that this was how it was supposed to end. Not with a scene, not with a reconciliation, not with a grand forgiveness, but with two people standing on different parts of a sidewalk, walking in different directions. Each of them a little different than they had been before. "Daddy." "I like her." "Do you?" "Yeah." "How come?" Ava thought about it for a long moment. "Because," she said. She looked at me. Logan looked at his daughter. She had by now a pink ring of strawberry around her mouth, and her eyes were clear, and she was 6 years old. "That's a good reason, baby." "Yeah, well, there is, in the telling of a thing like this, always the temptation to tidy it, to say that Claire Whitmore became a perfect person, and that Logan Hayes stopped being tired, and that Ava grew up to write a book about them, and that everyone involved lived, from that afternoon in the creamery forward, in a state of continuous moral improvement. The truth is messier than that, which is the only reason the truth is worth telling. Claire made the Monday meetings into a thing her company was known for, and she also, 3 months later, lost her temper in a boardroom and said something to a junior associate that she had to apologize for the next day, by name, in front of the same 3 people who had heard her say it. She made that apology badly. She made it again the week after, better. She kept making it in one form or another for the rest of her career, because a woman does not unlearn 28 years in 3 months, or in 3 years, or in 30. What she does is she begins to notice sooner. She begins to catch herself at the door of the mistake, and then at the door to the room where the mistake happens. And then she begins sometimes to not walk to the room at all. That is what change looks like in real life. It does not look like a ribbon cut on a new building. It looks like a woman standing at a door. Logan did not become a different man. He did not, in the years that followed, re-enter public life, or make a grand speech, or stop fixing his neighbor's dishwasher for $80 when the part cost $34. He did, however, begin to do a few small things he had not done in a long time. He went back to the annual meetings of his company wearing a better coat, and he said, at the one in October of that year, a sentence that surprised his cousin, which was that he was considering coming back part-time to work on a program he had been thinking about, which would put money into small companies run by people the market had decided not to see. His cousin did not know, when he said yes, that the program had been running quietly for 6 years. He found out eventually. It was a complicated conversation. They got through it. Ava grew up. She did not, in the end, write a book about her father. She grew up to be a pediatric nurse in a city 200 miles away, which was a thing nobody in her family had predicted, and she married a man named Ben who made documentary films about small-town librarians, and she had 2 children of her own, and she had, all her life, a habit of watching people carefully in lines at banks and at grocery stores and at the DMV, and of speaking to strangers who looked tired, and of kneeling down to her own children when they needed her to, and telling them things her father had told her. She did not remember most of the details of the morning she had sat on a planter and eaten a grape lollipop. She remembered always the feeling of her father's hand on her cheek and the word minute. Claire and Logan did not, as the movies would have it, fall in love. They were not built for that. They were, both of them, private people with separate lives, and what they had built between them was not a romance. It was something rarer and, in its own way, more lasting. Every few months, for the rest of their lives, one of them would run into the other at the creamery on 4th Street, or at a charity breakfast where they had, each, been invited separately, or once, on a flight out of Ashford International to a conference neither of them remembered afterward. They would nod at each other. They would, sometimes, sit together for a few minutes. Claire would, at some point, ask after Ava. Logan would, at some point, ask after the company. And then, each time, they would go their own ways, not because they disliked each other, but because what they had was not a thing that needed more than that to stay alive. Betty Marlowe sold the creamery 9 years later to a young couple who kept the pink and white awning and changed almost nothing else. She retired to a small house in the country with her sister. She died at 84, peacefully, in a chair on her front porch, with a book in her lap and a cup of coffee gone cold beside her. And at her memorial service, a tall woman in her late 30s stood up and told a story about a day at the counter of a small shop on 4th Street when a stranger had told her, "Han, you eat your ice cream," and the room had laughed, because most of them had at one time or another gotten that same advice from Betty. And Logan Hayes lived and kept living on Ellery Street in his torn canvas coat with his cracked phone, his patched boot, his quiet accounts, and his small, careful life. He did not become famous. He did not, in the end, want to. He had learned a long time before that the things that mattered were done in the corners, and that the people who most needed to be seen were often seen best by the people who asked for nothing in return. If there is a lesson in any of this, it is not a pretty one. It is this: you will, many times in your life, stand in a line behind a stranger, and you will, many times, decide something about that stranger without asking them a single question. Most of the time, you will be wrong. Sometimes the stranger will be a man with a hole in his boot who has quietly helped more people than you will ever meet. Sometimes the stranger will be an exhausted mother on her 3rd shift. Sometimes the stranger will be a teenager with a secret he has not yet told anyone. You will not, most of the time, find out. You will not, most of the time, be corrected. The world will not walk a bank manager out of a frosted glass office to hand you the truth on a Tuesday morning. You will walk away from that line, and the stranger will walk away, and neither of you will ever know. Which is why the question is not whether the stranger is worth your kindness. The question is whether you are the kind of person who gives it anyway. On a rainy Tuesday morning in April, in a city called Ashford, a 6-year-old girl with a gap in her front teeth looked up at a woman in a camel coat and said, very quietly, "I think she was being mean," and a man knelt down and said, "We don't judge a whole person by 1 minute," and the rest of this story, and every story like it that has ever been told, began there, and ended nowhere in particular, which is how the real ones tend to end. They ate their ice cream, they went home. The rain eventually stopped.